Vanachari Jaguna Dhiravanachari Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. There's quite a bit packed in today's class, so we'll have to narrow it a little bit. This is the chapter from the second canto, Scheduled Incarnations. Now, the Bhagavatam has, let me ask a question of you. Is the Bhagavatam in the past tense, the present tense, or the future tense? Which tense is it written in? Let's say past tense. Who says it's written in the past tense? Who say in the present tense? Who says it's in the future tense? Who doesn't say? Okay, think about it for a minute. We'll have some familiarity sitting in classes. Which tense is a Bhagavatam written in? Yes. From what I've seen so far. Okay. A lot of it is in the past tense. That's a very good observation. Yes. All of them? Yes, it's in all of them. Now, which part of the Bhagavatam is, give me a part that's in the present tense. I'm not trying to make you tense here. Just think about it. No, not the verses. Verses. Just verses. Well, I mean, yes.
Conversations between the sages?
Yeah, that's in the present tense. It's written in the present tense. Now where's the future tense? Somebody give me an idea. There's a canto that's primarily written in the future tense. Which one? One that I need to think a little. Yes. 12th canto. Last one happens to be in the future tense. And I happen to be the production manager at the BBT when we were producing the books which Rita Nanaraj was translating in the 80s. And when I was reading the manuscript, I chuckled. Why would I chuckle? Because it said, I'm never going to see this craziness it's talking about in my lifetime. I was wrong. It's the age of quarrel and things got worse. And there's some hints in this chapter pointing to the 12th canto. Some of the verses we're talking about what Kali Yuga would look like. There was a time when there were statesmen on the planet. And there's very few, like elected officials now, tend to be greedy for power. And there's, I was hungry, thanks. Okay, so there's a very, statesmen are more rare, and people wanting to hold on to power. I mean, we recently had a president who wouldn't give up power to the last second, because they want to hold on to it. What's a story from the Bhagavatam like that? Somebody who wanted to hold on to power had to be convinced to leave the palace. Yes, Dhritarashtra. I mean, he had lost the war, lost everything, but he still wanted to stay in the palace. Finally, I think it was Vidura came to him and said, "Get out of here. What are you doing?" So people tend to hold on to power for the sake of holding on to power. See that in the corporate world. Somebody screws everything up, a whole corporation's going to hell, but somebody wants to hold on to power. That false ego is very, very present. I see it in ISKCON. Somebody is in a position and it's time to move on. I've been in that where I've had a position. It's time for me to do something else. Krishna's telling me everything's very clear. It's like neon signs flashing at me. Time for change. But I want to hold on to it. Because there's two things that happen to all of us. We don't want anything to change, and we don't like things the way they are. So how do you solve that dilemma? That we'll discuss today. But you do it. It has to do with connecting with Krishna. So we're going to begin with verse 36.
A person who is searching after the supreme absolute truth, the personality Godhead, must certainly search for it up to this, in all circumstances, in all space and time, and both directly and indirectly.
O Brahma, just follow this conclusion by fixed concentration of mind, and no pride will disturb you, neither in the partial nor in the final devastation.
Shukadev Goswami said to Maharaj Parikshit, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, after being seen in his transcendental form instructing Brahmaji, the leader of the living entities, disappeared.
On the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who is the object of transcendental enjoyment for the senses of devotees, Brahma, with folded hands, began to recreate the universe, full with living entities as it was previously.
Thus, once upon a time, the forefather of the living entities and the father of religiousness, Lord Brahma, situated himself in acts of regulated principles, desiring self-interest for the welfare of all living entities.
Narada, the most dear of the inheritor sons of Brahma, always ready to serve his father, strictly follows the instructions of his father by his mannerly behavior, meekness, and sense control.
Narada very much pleased his father and desired to know all about the energies of Vishnu, the master of all energies. For Narada was the greatest of all sages and the greatest of all devotees, O king.
The great sage Narada also inquired in detail from his father, Brahma, the great grandfather of all the universe, after seeing him well satisfied.
Just pause a second. The great sage Narada inquired from his father, Brahma, the great grandfather of all the universe. Why is he the great grandfather?
Thereupon, the supplementary...
No, I want somebody to answer that question. Why is he the great grandfather? Somebody says you're a great grandfather. Is there the great sage Narada inquired in detail from his father Brahma, the great grandfather of all the universe? So that's one simple. First living entity. That's all. First, it's like that. Okay, continue.
Thereupon, the supplementary Vedic literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, which was described by the personality of Godhead and which contains 10 characteristics, was told with satisfaction by the father Brahma to his son Narada.
In succession, O king, the great sage Narada instructed Srimad Bhagavatam unto the unlimitedly powerful Vyasadeva, who meditated in devotional service upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, and on the bank of the river Saraswati.
O king, your questions as to how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead, as well as other questions, I shall answer in detail by explanation of the 4 verses already mentioned.
And I made a mistake. I said we're in the scheduled incarnation chapter, but we're actually in the answers by citing the Lord's version chapter, so I correct myself. Okay. So I'm going to go back to verse 36. We have so much. Do we chant the Sanskrit or not? How do you? I think, well, we can go back to 36. Sanskrit. Somebody take the lead in chanting the Sanskrit while I look at the purport because it's a long purport and I have to pick which part I want to focus on. Okay, this is the last of what's called the 4 nutshell verses, a summary of what's the essence of the Bhagavatam is about. And they looked at these verses, didn't they? Yeah, okay, so familiar. So a person who is searching after the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, most certainly search for it up to this. This is referring to the prior verses. In all circumstances, in all space and time, and both directly and indirectly. Now, what does that mean? So we're going to jump ahead on the purport to the part that says, begins with indirectly. The long purport. Well, we're going in the purport. I'll start reading. Indirectly, it is said that the whole Vedic social construction of human society is so made that everyone, that's each of you, acts as part and parcel of the complete body of the Lord. Now, Prabhupada next sentence uses an interesting phrase, and he uses this frequently. And the intelligent class of men or women, or the Brahmins, are situated in the face of the Lord. Now, I run the Bhaktivedanta Institute, and our mission is to present Krishna consciousness to the intelligent class, people who are inquiring. The administrative class, the Kshatriyas are situated in the arms, the productive class, the Vaishyas are the belt or belly of the Lord, and the laborers are the feet of the Lord. Therefore, the complete social construction of the body of the Lord and all the parts of the body, namely Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Sudras, are meant to serve the Lord's whole body. Jump ahead. Universal consciousness is factually achieved by coordinated service service of all concerned to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that means that one part is not better than the other. It's the coordinated parts that work. Sometimes Brahmins become very proud. In India, we see this not rarely. You meet someone, first words out of the mouth, I'm so glad to meet you. I am a Brahmin. And immediately, he's not a Brahmin, because a Brahmin would be humble. But I'm a Brahmin. Brahmin, how? By what basis is this person claiming to be a Brahmin? Somebody tell me. Birth. Now, Krishna says in the Gita, Chatur Varnam are determined by guna and karma. The Sanskrit word for birth is janma, like Janmashtami. Krishna appears. The word janma is never found in the Vedic literature related to being a Brahmin. It's never found. But they claim it. We find this birthright all over the place in this world. For example, in America, up until the 60s, the 1960s, some will find this hard to believe, but it's true. Downtown Gainesville in the 60s, there was a drugstore. It's still around, but different location, called Wise's Pharmacy. And Wise's Pharmacy that used to be downtown had 2 water fountains. Why do they have 2 water fountains? Are people thirsty? Somebody tell me why in the 60s they had 2 water fountains. Yes. Say again? Segregation. Yes. One for coloreds and one for whites. Birthright. If you were born colored, you had to use a different water fountain. That was Gainesville. The local newspaper, the Gainesville Sun, used to have a column. I've seen it. And it was called Negro News. And that was, what went on in that side of town. So this is bodily concept of life. That because I am born in a white body, I got a better body than a black body. And very common, same thing in India. In South Africa, we had apartheid until about 25 years ago, or 30 years ago, something like that. All over the world, we find that this bodily concept is what makes the peace formula very difficult. So Prabhupada is saying the same thing here. So, therefore, even the great scientists, the great philosophers, the great mental speculators, the great politicians, the great industrialists, the great social reformers, people who we kind of, social reformers, these are the cool people, we think, cannot give any relief to the rest of society because they do not know the secret of success as mentioned in the Bhagavatam. Namely, one must know the mystery of Bhakti Yoga. In the Gita, it is said, Nemam duskrito no mudha, because the so-called great leaders of human societies are ignorant of this great knowledge of Bhakti Yoga and are always engaged in ignoble acts of sense gratification, bewildered by the external energy. They are stubborn rebels against supremacy of the Supreme Personality, and they never agree to surrender to him because they are fools, miscreants, and the lowest types of human beings. So, I'm going to skip ahead. Therefore, all advancement of knowledge in the present context of being is being misused by cats, dogs, fighting with one another for sense gratification, and all acquisition of knowledge in science, philosophy, fine arts, nationalism, economic development, religion, and great activities are being spoiled by being used as what language? Dresses for dead men. There is no utility in the dresses used for covering a coffin of a dead body, save in giving false applause from the ignorant public. Funerals I've been to, I noticed the funeral parlor sells these very expensive coffins, $5,000. And they're made of really mahogany wood with very soft lining inside. And that is very soft and well cushioned. a nice place to rest in peace. It's really like that when you think about it. I mean, and with a pillow in there, I might add. You go to the funeral parlor, you'll see, and they make a lot of money off of this because if somebody's in so much grief and the funeral director says, "Oh, where would you like your relative?" You go on, just put them in an ordinary pine box, or you want to put them in something really nice. I want the best for that dead body. And they make a lot of money off of it. It is a nasty business. There is no utility in the dresses used for covering a coffin of a dead body, save getting false applause from the ignorant public. The Srimad Bhagavatam therefore says again and again that without attachment of the status of Bhakti Yoga, all the activities of human society are to be considered absolute failures. So, and I'll jump ahead a little more. It is one's mind that generates different kinds of bodies for suffering different kinds of material pangs. In other words, your particular body you have now is a result of your mind. Your mind dictated this life, the kind of body you're getting. Think about that a moment. You own this body. Now, a devotee's mood, somebody who gets suffering from the body will think, "Oh, why did this happen to me?" But a devotee thinks, "This is what I wanted. I got it. Now let me improve my consciousness. Let me up." We don't blame others for our suffering. Very difficult point, not to blame others for our suffering. I mean, when we think about it, how many of us cannot blame others when something difficult happens to us? This is what is trying to be said. So, to become absorbed in the transcendental name, quality, forms, activities of the Supreme means to change the temper of the mind from matter to absolute knowledge, which leads one to the path of absolute realization and frees one from the bondage of material contact. There's much in this purport, but we'll discuss a little. The purport goes on and on for pages, but if I read the whole purport, you'll go on and on sleeping, so I won't do that. I'm going to read just a little bit more here. The cream of the Bhagavatam is the foregoing 4 slokas or verses. But sometimes the impersonalists try to squeeze out a different interpretation. We should be careful, noting that the 4 slokas were first described by the Lord himself. Thus, the impersonalist has no scope. So there are attempts to squeeze out different interpretations. So here in the previous verses, we're talking about the creation of the universe and Brahma being first, the great-grandfather. Now, let me ask a question. According to modern science, what was there before the Big Bang? Yes.
They don't know.
Well, they have some speculations. Of course, they don't know because they were never there. Yes. Before that, what was there? There's a concept, ex nihilo, does something come from nothing? And modern science has actually come to the conclusion that might not make sense. I'll give you an example. Who here knows what the Planck constant is? What is the Planck constant? Somebody tell me. Do you know? Anybody say what the Planck I don't mean what the number is, but what it means. Yes. Say again. Something to do with that. It's a number, very tiny number, that is used in many equations of physics. And if that number in the 10th decimal place was off by one number, mathematically, the universe wouldn't exist, according to the calculations of science. And these initial conditions of the universe are quite precise, what's needed. There's a Planck constant, and there's other constants that come in. And these constants are numbers. Now, how many of you have ever seen, not on a piece of paper, but see just walking down the street and in the woods, let's say you're in the woods, do you ever see a number? You're in the woods. You see a number of things, but you don't see numbers. Numbers are a concept in the mind. You don't actually see a number. I might see 10 trees, but I don't see, that's in my mind. So numbers must come from the mind. And for the universe to have worked, according to modern science, there has to be these fixed numbers. That means preceding the universe, there must be what? A mind and consciousness. Even the modern scientists are seeing it. The best of the scientists, the Nobel laureate Penrose, among others, say the universe is cyclic, meaning the universe, there was a prior universe, it collapses, as somebody said, into a dense ball, then comes out again like a bubble, then collapses, comes out as a bubble. Anybody ever seen a picture that represents that? It's called the cover of the first canto of the Bhagavatam. It's exactly what you see. You look at it, and if you listen to what the modern theories of cosmology are, it's exactly that cover of the Bhagavatam. It collapses and comes out. Mahavishnu is breathing and millions of universes come out. The Webb telescope is seeing far, far out galaxies, millions of light years away. A light year is a long time. How far light travels in a year? How far does light travel in a second? It's 186,000 miles in a second. So imagine what light travels in a year, and they're finding galaxies. They're seeing 24 million light years away, and very, very distant. Nearest stars are probably about 4 light years away. And they're seeing, and the creation is bewildering. It's bewildering. The more the scientists look at it, the more bewildered they get. And the more we read the Bhagavatam, the more it makes sense. There was a book came out in the 70s. And the book was an anti-cult book called Us a Cult, called even Christian monasteries a cult. We were in good company. And there were some weird cults then, some really weird ones. So we were also in some bad company. And the chapter on us began this way. These Krishnas have such a weird belief. They believe the Lord lies down and breathes out millions of universes. How weird would that be? When I read that, I said, that's the God I want. That is a cool God to do that. That's what I'm looking for. So I found that very attractive, even though the author of that book was trying to persuade me differently. And the modern cosmologists, this is what they are seeing now. millions of galaxies, universes, whatever the terms are, just coming out, and they come out like bubbles, and after some time, billions of years, they collapse and then come out again, and it's an endless cycle. So that's what modern cosmology has come to. At the Bhaktivedanta Institute, we have recently, last August, been tasked with designing the museum for the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. And so we have astronomers, philosophers, Sanskritists, astrophysicists, and all gathering, just finished a gathering at our headquarters in Gainesville, our second in-person gathering. And we're trying to see, how do we explain this to the public in a way they'll understand? It's a real challenge, but there are many correlations. And the goal of all this is to understand ultimately our relationship with the Supreme. So sometimes we need to be a little awestruck. Give me an example of some Krishna saying to someone, you ought to be a little awestruck for a moment, just to help you go deeper. Yes.
When Krishna revealed the universal form to Arjuna.
And what did Arjuna say after he revealed it?
Oh, take it away.
Yeah, enough. Look, wow, this is too much for me. It's amazing. So that's the idea. So herein, we're given like a glimpse. What is it like to looking at the whole cosmos elements, looking at the big picture, so that for a moment we're awestruck, so we can be a little humble, and then get to understand our relationship with the Supreme. Let me see. I'm going to pause here before I go on, see if there are any questions or comments on this. I talked about the fine-tuning constants that are found in the beginning of the universe, and without them, according to modern science, there is no universe. Fine-tuning constants must mean numbers. Numbers are in the mind. There must be intelligence before there's matter. Many modern scientists, believe it or not, are coming to that conclusion in the last decade. There's something before matter. Consciousness precedes matter. Matter doesn't precede consciousness. We all brought up with the idea that matter precedes consciousness, that we evolve from protoplasm, evolved in us. But how does evolution occur? It requires a driving force. That driving force, that information needed to make it work, comes from consciousness. So, questions? Wait.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much for your class. You said, while trying to help the museum for TOVP, the team of BIs dealing with some challenges. So far, what are the biggest ones in us trying to present?
Well, there are a few. First, we don't have all the answers. I mean, what does the word universe mean? And there's several Sanskrit words that are translated universe. So when Prabhupada says universe, it could mean the solar system, it could mean something else. So we have to go to the commentaries and the Sanskritists and unpack. Prabhupada specifically said, I'm not a cosmologist to give these details. He left that to us. So we have to do a lot of unpacking. Next thing is, we have to present Krishna consciousness as a science, show there's science behind it, without being in their face. I'll give you an example. There was, at the museum, there was some mood, which was changed when we took over, but some mood that follows the bumper sticker you find in the South. You see this bumper sticker. Here's what it says. Bible says it, and I believe it. It sounds that way. Amen. Amen. And so we have to avoid our version. The Vedas say it, and I believe it. What, Indian accent? Yeah, with the Indian accent. Exactly. So, how do we avoid that? The Vedas say it, I believe it. I mean, the Vedas do say it, I do believe it. That's besides the point. But there's a reason I believe it. You know, I've studied it, I've examined it, and as it says from here, and you examine it. A person who is searching after the truth must certainly search for it up to this and that, and all these sciences. Prabhupada is not saying they're bad. He's saying, but they have to take us to understand who's behind it. The sciences, arts, have to take us to that point. So our challenge is how to present it without becoming a creationist museum. We have the Christian creationists. The earth was formed 5,000, roughly 500 years ago. The rocks were deposited in Noah's flood. I mean, there's a museum that actually in Orlando that teaches that. And we call them as Christian creationists. Well, we have Vedic creationists too. So we have to present it in a way that's convincing to people. And the goal is not to tell people what to think. Sometimes as preachers, we want to tell people what to think. Our goal is to get them to think. When they're done with the museum, a successful visitor would say, one mantra, and this is the mantra, I want to know more. Otherwise, it's an anthropological museum. Oh, the Hindus think this, and the Christians think that, and the Muslims think this. That's not very useful, anthropological museum. Museum has to get people to say, wow, this starts making sense. I'd like to know more. Then we've just, to use the baseball analogy, we've hit a home run. Or the cricket analogy, what is it? You hit a wicket. We got a wicket. Yeah, or whatever. Yes, Kartikeya.
Prabhu, I had a question.
Yes. I'll stand up so I can see you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the class. So you mentioned this was one of the 4 Chatushlokas, right?
Nutshell slokas.
Yes. So I didn't quite understand why it was so important. Could you please explain more on that?
Sure. That's a nice question, by the way. Why is it so important? Well, we'll go back to it. O Brahma, whatever appears to be of any value is without relation to me, has no reality. It's just illusion. You can see why that's important. It's establishing things in relation to Krishna. Please know, O Brahma, that the universal elements enter into the cosmos. At the same time, do not enter in the cosmos. Similarly, I myself exist within everything created. At the same time, I'm outside of everything. So that's a paradox, making us think deep. So it's understanding the relationship of God to everything. So that's why these verses, a person who is searching after the truth, in the original verse we did, must search up to this in all circumstances, all space and time, both directly and indirectly. And that's why I use the purport. I went into the long purport, but I went into the section on looking indirectly. So in order to gain knowledge of our relation with the Supreme, we're going to look sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly at secondary evidence. Jiva Goswami, in his analysis of the pramanas, ways of knowing, says there are 3 main pramanas. There's more, but 3. One of them is sabda, shastra. But another one is observation, seeing the world. Another is inference. Then the question comes, what do you do if what you read in Shastra is different than what you observe or different from what you might infer? Well, if you're a fanatic, you can say the Shastra says it, I believe it. But that's not what Jiva Goswami says to do. He says, we give primacy to Shastra. But if it doesn't make sense, we dig deeper and deeper until it makes sense. Sariputta, the late genius of the Bhaktivedanta Institute, that's what he did in his books. He went deeper and deeper, for those who have read his books, and he started unpacking it. I'll give an example that may be useful. There are some, unfortunately, more than I'd like to say, that think that the earth is flat. I won't ask if anybody here believes that. I don't want to embarrass you. But there are people who are convinced from reading the Bhagavatam the earth is flat. They have a flat earth society that meets every year. And that's not devotees, but there's some devotees who write on this. And we just finished a book at the BI demonstrating by Prabhupada statements, by Shastra, by science, and we even have Namamrita, an airline captain, writing a chapter that the earth is not flat. But why do they say this? Well, in the Bhagavatam, I'm giving an example of how we unpack things. There is a discussion of discs, these flat discs of Bhumandala, which can be referred to as the earth. And when you read it, well, does that mean the flat earth? Does that mean the flat earth society got it right? And, well, Sariputta unpacked it. It's only 4 verses, unpacked it. It's a little technical to get into, so I'll try to summarize it. Look at the solar system. All of you have seen in elementary school maps of the solar system. Let me ask a question. What's flat about the solar system? There is something flat about it. What yes? Elliptical. Well, that is true, but not for the solar system. The solar system itself, there's a flatness to it. What is it? Yes. The elliptical plane. Yeah, they're all in a plane. The planets are all in one plane. You've all been to a planetarium or seen models of it. It's all on a plane. Yeah, you know, you go Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, like that. They're all in a plane. Doesn't have to be. I mean, you could have one planet going this way, one going that way, one going that way, but they're not. They're all in a plane. That's the flat Earth, the plane. And Sariputta's Mystery Sacred Universe explains that. So the great sages understood without telescopes. They understood that the solar system is flat, and they described it that way. They understood it, which is quite incredibly good science. And so this is what unpacking means. We dig deeper. So our own observation is we don't fall at the end of the earth. I just flew to India and, you know, I went around. And I came back and I didn't fall off the edge that I know of. So this is what is being said herein. We have to go directly and indirectly, dig deep to understand. And I promise you, as you study the Bhagavatam, you are going to come across items that do not make sense to you. I can't understand this. What do I do? Who has that happened to? Anybody here read something that just doesn't make sense to them? All of you should be raising your hands. All of you. Things that don't make sense. This is teaching us here in how to make sense out of it. And it doesn't mean giving up your intelligence. It means engaging your intelligence deeper and deeper. And that's what we do in Bhagavatam class. And therefore, what is the most important part of Bhagavatam class for many? There are several parts. There is the beginning, which we say prayers. There is the verse, there is the talk, and there is the question and answers. Which is the most important part of the Bhagavatam class to you? Who says it's the prayers at the beginning? Who says it's the verse? Who says it's the discussion by the teacher? What? Who says it's the question and answers? And there is no answer, right answer to that question, because each of you may have something that's different. Some of you may really focus on the prayers at the beginning. Oh, really get into that. But for many of us, the question and the answers are, how did Prabhupada end almost every class a day? Are there any questions? And he really wanted people to ask questions. And when I met Prabhupada, that's all he did, is have me ask questions for 3 days. Said, ask more, which was kind of surprising to me. And whenever I met Prabhupada, I said, so you have a question? Really wanted, wants us to think. So you asked, why are these 4 verses important? Because they make us think. The purpose of a Bhagavatam class is not to tell you what to think. It's to get you to think. And that can be painful. With that, we got 1 minute left. Is there one question? Yes, Shamala. Sure.
Just a quick question. How do we avoid becoming self-righteous? Like, oh, the Vedas say it, and so I believe it, that mood. How do we avoid
that's such an important question. How do we avoid being self-righteous? Well, it's not a problem for me because I'm right. So it's very easy to become self-righteous. I know more. It's very unattractive when we present Krishna consciousness from a self-righteous platform. So the question, to unpack that question is, I'm going to go a step more. How do we be humble? And it's reading verses like this. That question really fits right in, because here, Lord Brahma is being instructed by the Lord that how amazing the universe is. Brahma is like number one, he's a creator. And Brahma, it's much bigger than you. Brahma is being made to be humble. There was one story in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Lord Brahma went to visit Lord Vishnu, and he knocked at the gates. Lord Brahma can do things like that. And the gatekeepers came, and Lord Brahma said, hello, I'm Brahma. I'm here to see the Lord. And gatekeeper went to see Narayan, came back, and said, which Brahma? Lord Brahma, what do you mean, which Brahma? I mean, not Brahma. Which Brahma? I'm the 4-headed Brahma, blah, blah, blah. Said, okay, come in. And then Brahma says, Lord, why did your doorkeeper ask such an odd question? That moment, Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, also known as Lord Narayan, snapped his fingers. He did whatever you do to make things happen. And all of a sudden, all these other Brahmas came from different universes. They couldn't see each other. Only our Brahma could see them. And the bigger the universe, the more heads Brahma has, because there are more dimensions, as I suspect. So our Brahma had 4 heads, and some Brahmas had hundreds, thousands. And then all the Brahmas came, but they couldn't see each other. But the Lord had called them. When they came, they offered obeisances, and all their heads hit the ground. And a tumultuous sound, as you can imagine. And our Brahma was just like, oh my God. And then the Brahma said, what can we do for you? And Vishnu says, I want to make sure everything's cool, everything's fine. Oh yeah, things are good. Good. Have a nice day. And they went off. Conversation, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, like that. And our Brahma became humble. So it's by humility that we don't become self-righteous. So humility is something we have to cultivate every day. I share this story. I've told this before, but I once went on a 5-hour walk with Radha Swami. We have these deep talks when I'm very, very lucky. And we were at a retreat. He said, let's play hooky this afternoon. So we went and played hooky and went for a long walk. And here's what he wanted to share with me. We have some old relation and we can talk about things. He said, every day people are praising me. Oh, Guru Day, this, that, your lotus footsies, whatever. And going on. And he said to me, Brahma, it's so hard. I used to be a pujari living in New Vrindavan. In the morning, there's no electricity. I'd have to break the ice off the top of the bucket, pour the water over me, shower and worship the deities. What a happy time that was. Now, every day, I have to spend considerable time reminding myself that all this praise is just something I'm passing on to Prabhupada so it doesn't affect me. And that's why he's such an effective preacher. He works to cultivate humility. So we have to work hard to cultivate our humility. Otherwise, we will be self-righteous. And self-righteous devotees who engage in outreach do not have good followings. Cultivate that humility. What does Lord Chaitanya say in his 8 verses? What does he say about humility? Can somebody help me? Yes. Humbler than talk to the microphone, please.
Be humbler than a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree.
Yes. And what does that allow us to do? Chant the holy name. Yeah. That allows us to do it. So if we ever find that our chanting is getting dull and disconnected, I mean, I won't embarrass you, but we'll say, who has that ever happened to? I mean, me for sure. It means that it's time to cultivate my humility. Cultivate it. Because all of a sudden it's so important. The Lord is actually dancing on my tongue. He's with me. It's my time for him. And I'm thinking of what somebody said about me on Facebook, which wasn't very nice. I'm thinking about that. I could be with the Lord, and I'm so concerned about my ego. I'm thinking what somebody said about me on Facebook when the Lord's actually there with me. So that requires humility. And humility is something we have to work on. I'll give a final example. Who here has taken a long plane ride to India? Do you notice something when you're on a long plane ride, especially, I've never done this, the 17-hour plane ride. Anybody done that one? The nonstop? I always stop in London, take a shower, change my clothes, and get on the next flight. But those who took the 17-hour, did you notice that everyone smells bad by the time you get there, including you? 17 hours sitting in one place. None of us are going to smell nice when we get there. It's the nature of the body. Therefore, what do we have to do? First thing we do when we get there is we shower and change our clothes, clean ourselves. In a similar way, we have to daily cleanse our mind by cultivating humility. Every day. If you do not shower every day, you will within one day, not smell very nice. It's what happens to all of us. Similarly, if every day we don't cultivate humility, our mind isn't going to smell very nice. In the old days, in the 60s, I had some tendency to try to be a hippie. It was a cool thing. And I failed. Because there was one hippie rule I violated. I showered every day. And and that was against the hippie culture. So I couldn't make it. It's my blessing. Okay, with that, it is time for breakfast. We'll stop here. It's a pleasure to be at Krishna House. I want you to know I'm here many days, but due to my wife having some immune issues, I don't go to crowded places. So I just listen online, but I'm glad to see you. If there's something I can help somebody one-on-one with some issue, especially concerning BI and science, I'm easy to reach, let me know. We'll go for a walk and I'll talk to you. Hare Krishna. Boy,